Hi all, welcome to the chapter 3 of Creativity Inc. Now in this chapter, Catmull tells the early stages of Pixar animation studio. Ed said that none of us has an idea on how to run the company. He knew nothing about profit and loss, even though he read tons of business books, but none of them gave him a clue on what to focus on, besides all those fancy slogans. Ed also mentioned about the yin and yang of Steve Jobs. He said that Steve Jobs was a very determined and inspiring leader. For example, he wanted sales offices across the country, even though they were not really making any profit at that time. He was also someone that lacked of patience, and if the customer came to Pixar without any preparation, he would say that this deal is a crap. But Ed mentioned that if you are brave enough to come back at him, he often respected it, poking at you and then reducing your thought, like dolphin size you up using a sonar. So he described Steve Jobs as an elephant, like a dolphin, because even though there were often arguments between him and Steve Jobs, those arguments were like sonar trying to test the depth of the level, the sea, by the dolphins. And Steve Jobs was trying to use his argument to poke more points from you to understand more about the idea that you're proposing. At that time, Ed Catmull was really fascinated by the total quality management and just-in-time manufacturing practice by Japanese firms such as Toyota. If you have heard of total quality management, it is actually a method developed by Edward Deming for Japanese company. And in TQM, total quality management, everyone is responsible to find and fix a problem. Even though you're not manager, you're just a normal local assembly worker in the production line, you can call the production to a halt. And normal workers could suggest changes and call out problems. And this kind of continuous improvement is a technique that Ed Catmull really wish Pixar can practice. So he came up with this methodology that the workers in Pixar should help him to manage Pixar and don't have to ask permission to take responsibility. Or even though Steve Jobs was very much involved in the purchase of Pixar, he only came to Pixar once a year because of Next, the company that Steve Jobs founded after his dismiss as the CEO of Apple. And Pixar really needed Steve Jobs' money to stay afloat. And there was one good news at that time where a short produced by Pixar animation studio called Luxor Jr. was nominated for Oscar in 1987. And that was the highlight of the early stages of Pixar production. And throughout the years, Steve Jobs has used 54 million of his own money to fund Pixar. And Pixar only managed to sell 300 computers. Steve felt that, this is not going to work. This is not going to be a business that I really wanted to invest in. And there were times that Steve tried to sell Pixar, but in the end could not part with it. Microsoft tried to offer at that time, but Steve Jobs just doesn't feel comfortable selling Pixar to Microsoft. And Ed mentioned that Pixar would not have survived without Steve Jobs. And although for some years, they are not sure whether if they can survive with him. But the turning point came when Katzenberg from Disney wanted Pixar to help them to make a feature film, even though he wanted Disney to own it. At that time, Disney was producing Little Mermaid, Lion King, Aladdin, which started the second golden age of Disney animation. But at that time, Steve said that, okay, you want to own this film, you are giving us money to make this film, but you are not going to buy our trade secret. At that time, John Lasseter, the master storyteller, already had an idea on what to be presented to Disney. He called it the Toy Story. And at that time, John was lacking confidence, even though he had been a master storyteller. They thought that Disney is going to school them on filmmaking, because Pixar has just transitioned to making films. So Disney were giving a lot of suggestion and modification to the initial version of Toy Story, and the whole movie became not John's movie anymore. For example, on the image on the right, you see that the lovely character Woody from Toy Story, initially he was portrayed as a character that was too dark and too mean, because Disney kept pushing for more age in the character. But because of all those opinions that came to John to modify his original idea, the whole movie became darker, and Disney didn't quite like it and asked the whole Toy Story team to rework the whole movie again. And at that time, after the modification of the film and all the editing and the directing, before the opening of the Toy Story movie, Steve Jobs wanted Pixar to go for an IPO, and he believed that by taking Pixar public, assuming that Toy Story is a success, and Disney CEO will realize that he has created his biggest rival, because Pixar has only signed 3 movies under contract. By going public, Steve Jobs feels that Pixar will have the leverage to discuss with Disney to ask for a 50-50 split. And it turned out to be right. Steve turned out to be right, because Pixar managed to raise an IPO of $140 million in that year. It was the biggest IPO in that year. And Toy Story was a success, and Disney accepted the 50-50 offer. So after Toy Story, Pixar became really successful, and they went on to make the second movie called A Bug's Life. But A Bug's Life was a problem for Pixar, because according to Ed and John, they missed a serious ongoing argument between the creative and production departments. Because after Toy Story, and in the middle of the Bug's Life production, the production team felt that they were being disrespected. As you all know, production's mission is to make sure that the company stay on budget, and they help to safeguard the process and also manage the resource. But those creative artists think that they are first class, and production managers were second class. They are just trying to hinder their creativity process. And so these two teams were not really working together. And that was a real big problem for Pixar at that time. And Ed really wanted to create an open environment where each of the persons should be able to talk to him directly. So to find out how Ed Catmull solved this problem, be sure to stay tuned to the videos for other chapters. Thank you.